Trời hôm nay thanh thanh, gió đưa cảnh mơn man tà áo, làn mây xanh vây quanh anh vừng hồng chiếu xuống niềm tin. Đàn chim non tung tăng như đón chào ngày vui thế gian, chúc ai vừa tìm được bên mơ. Mừng cho đôi uyên ương sớm sum vầy vui trong hạnh phúc, và đôi tay thân yêu sẽ là nguồn sống của đời ta. Nhiều khi mong trăng lên chung chén trà kể chuyện thuở xưa, bên bếp hồng đùa vui trẻ thơ.
But oddly enough, the young government in the South, which was not supposed to last, was becoming strong. Although it had many problems, it was beginning to satisfy the desires of the people and to develop a tradition of nationhood. The communists realized they must take immediate action. But how to destroy a growing nation? By violence, by terrorism. The blueprint was urgent, desperate, and brutal, for the communists were impatient for power. Hardcore communist terrorists trained peasant recruits to assist them in their plans. For here in the village and hamlet, they knew that the battle for control of the Republic would be won or lost. Here in the rich rice lands of the Mekong Delta,
trời hôm nay thanh thanh, gió đưa cảnh mơn man tà áo, làn mây xanh vây quanh anh vừng hồng chiếu xuống niềm tin. Đàn chim non tung tăng như đón chào ngày vui thế gian, chúc ai vừa tìm được bên mơ. Mừng cho đôi uyên ương sớm sum vầy vui trong hạnh phúc, và đôi tay thân yêu sẽ là nguồn sống của đời ta. Nhiều khi mong trăng lên chung chén trà kể chuyện thuở xưa, bên bếp hồng đùa vui trẻ thơ. Từ khi sánh vai nên đôi bạn hiền, đêm về nghe con khóc vui triền miên. Lời ru trong đêm vắng với tình thương chứa chan, con mong ước gì vì ta vẫn bên nhau. Ngày em lo nương khoai dưới mưa rằm anh lo cày cấy, dù cho bao gian lao nhưng tình nghèo góp sức mà vui. Cầu mong cho mai sau gió đưa thuyền mình về đến nơi, phút bạc đầu đẹp lòng lứa đôi. Trời hôm nay thanh thanh, gió đưa cảnh mơn man tà áo, làn mây xanh vây quanh anh vừng hồng chiếu xuống niềm tin. Đàn chim non tung tăng như đón chào ngày vui thế gian, chúc ai vừa tìm được bên mơ. Mừng cho đôi uyên ương sớm sum vầy vui trong hạnh phúc, và đôi tay thân yêu sẽ là nguồn sống của đời ta. Nhiều khi mong trăng lên chung chén trà kể chuyện thuở xưa, bên bếp hồng đùa vui trẻ thơ. Từ khi sánh vai nên đôi bạn hiền, đêm về nghe con khóc vui triền miên. Lời ru trong đêm cho bao gian lao, nhưng tình nghèo góp sức mà vui. Cầu mong cho mai sau gió đưa thuyền mình về đến nơi, phút bạc đầu đẹp lòng lứa đôi.
All over held a new meaning for Troyes, for darkness was now a time of terror. That night the shots came again. The city councils were terrified. No one would assume responsibility. Crimes went unpunished. The village policemen, unable to enforce the law, looked the other way. School teachers were a special target. Many, frightened, left the villages and would not return. Even simple commercial links with other villages were broken. Each family, frightened, turned in upon itself. When the Viet Cong were sure the village was completely demoralized, they would appear openly. Their next step was propaganda. The whole village was summoned. Taking the hatred for the French, which was a part of every Vietnamese heritage, the communists turned it against the United States. And in hundreds of villages all over the country, the message was the same: imperialism. Imperialism. No need to define the term. Enough to repeat it with the most terrible adjectives. Imperialism was ingeniously extended to apply to certain Vietnamese. Imperialists became any educated person, any person who lived in a city. The leaderless and frightened villagers had become, to use the communists' own analogy, nutritious waters for the predatory fish of the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong then begin to organize the villages. They take livestock to feed their troops and conscript young men from the village. And who are the Viet Cong? In short, anyone who has nothing to lose and much to gain. Men who like the feeling of power a gun gave, never more than 1 or 2% of the population. One morning, Troyes learned that both pigs had been taken by the Viet Cong. Far from Troyes' garden, the leaders in Saigon saw the continuing deterioration of the country and urgently requested increased U.S. help. The United States responded immediately by sending large shipments of food, fertilizers, medicine, and other materials so badly needed by the South Vietnamese people. At that time, it was erroneously assumed that massive infusions of material goods would solve the problem. This aid was meant to reach the peasants, but a problem quickly appeared: distribution. Where were the supplies most urgently needed, and by whom? No one knew, for the Viet Cong had successfully broken contact between peasant families and local authorities. When the Americans supervised the distribution themselves, they gave it out in the daytime. It was often commandeered by the Viet Cong at night. Government troops, even when they could move about freely during the day, could not hold a countryside where there was no government. To the outsider, peasants, all wearing similar garb, looked almost exactly alike. Who was friend and who was foe? With no way of distinguishing between the loyal peasant and the hardcore Viet Cong, it was impossible to seek out and destroy the enemy. Gradually, certain Vietnamese and Americans began to recognize the essential problem: to reestablish contact between individuals and local authorities, this could be done, information could be acquired, which would enable the government to deal with the Viet Cong effectively. A few highly qualified Vietnamese officers were encouraged to experiment with small groups of villagers to learn what their aspirations and grievances were, to learn what they were willing to fight for. Experiments were begun to create a force that would challenge the Viet Cong on their own ground, a force that could remain in the villages at night, a force the villagers could come to trust enough to reveal information to help the military effort. It would have to be a highly motivated force, infused so deeply with belief in their own cause, they could destroy the communist distortions. Knowledge gained in these experiments became the basis for a new concept, the People's Action Teams. The next step was getting such a concept accepted. Many people felt the problem was purely military, that the primary task was to defeat the Viet Cong, leaving restoration of local government for a later day. But gradually, the futility of a purely military victory became obvious. Many began to realize the villages would have to be won along with the battles, or there would be no victory. Previous experience had shown that the program would have to be controlled at the local rather than the national level. The key official was the head of the government in each province. His cooperation must be secured because he would select the peasants to be taken from the province and returned for work in the same province. And then there were logistical problems. Who would pay the men? The Americans agreed to a limited support if funds would go directly to the province level. As a result of extensive discussions, the outline of a training program was developed. The objective, organize peasant recruits into 40-man teams and give them enough paramilitary training to defend themselves. Above all, the recruits would have to learn that only when they gained the trust of the villagers would the villagers confide in them. With agreement secured, a small outpost near Vung Tau was leased as a training center. Here, the students in the People's Action Teams, known as cadres, were to begin training. The success or failure of the program would lie in the motivational training. How to turn peasants from a narrow family circle into citizens who would fight against communism. The key lay in the faculty, dedicated young Vietnamese. Their approach was unique and could only have been developed by Vietnamese themselves. They knew how to reach their own people. They knew how sentimental they were, how bitter at the constant war, how sick of poverty and corruption. The training had to be as direct and as effective as the training given by the Viet Cong, but the difference in the philosophy was all important. It was summed up in the motto, victory through sincerity and love. This motto was embodied in the school emblem. To implant this idea in their minds, every conceivable use was made of national history and symbolism based upon the psychology of the people. First of all, it was necessary to instill pride in being a Vietnamese citizen. The students are told the beautiful story of the fairy princess who marries a dragon emperor. The fairy princess represents the gentleness and poetry of the spirit, while the dragon represents the power and values of material things. The fairy princess and the dragon had 100 children, from whom all Vietnamese are descended. Later, they hear of the great men of Vietnamese history, warriors and emperors of the past whose names are written on colorful flags as a constant reminder to the students. They are also given a picture of the future, picture of a time when great factories turn out electricity to light up the most remote homes, of a time when consumer goods will be plentiful and cheap, of a time when all children will go to school in good health and be able to complete their educations in a time of peace and opportunity. Finally, the students are urged to accept the challenge. They are told of the awful devastation of 20 years of war, of the terrors and miseries inflicted on the people by the Viet Cong. Of the poverty of the people, endured for so many centuries. There is now a chance for their country to improve. Material and technical help from the free world is available. Everything is waiting. The future is yours. It's up to you to go out and win it. How? Go out among the people and win their allegiance, for without that allegiance, no victory is possible. To illustrate the possibilities of accomplishment, the students are taken on a 14-kilometer walk from the camp to Vung Tau. The meaning is clear and simple. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. Songs were a part of the training, all aimed at instilling a sense of pride and self-confidence that would enable the students to go out and spread these new ideas among their people. Graduation was staged to summarize the training. Surrounded by symbols of the Vietnamese past, the ceremony was planned as an experience the cadres would never forget. Victory through sincerity and love. It was compared to a flame they would carry back to their distant homes. And that night, the students renewed the school pledge to be loyal to our country and to perform our duties unselfishly, to serve the people, especially the aged, the sick, and the poor, to be united to fight against the communist traitors and other enemies of the nation. There were diplomas for the graduates, and for the outstanding students, prizes. Leaders had been identified. Many would be selected for the school faculty to train future classes. But the essential questions remained unanswered. Had they been trained well enough to defend themselves against Viet Cong attacks in the villages? Would their enthusiasm last? Would they remain in the villages at night and be able to fulfill the objectives of the program? What these students accomplished would be closely watched for the answers. And back they went to the countryside. It wasn't long before their success became apparent. Some members of the team wear black peasant suits and help the peasants with the harvest, while others wear camouflage uniforms and carry weapons to protect the team and the villagers from surprise raids by the Viet Cong. The way to the market in this village was over a bridge, destroyed many months before by the Viet Cong. And the peasants knew that rebuilding would only mean another explosion. Until the arrival of the cadres, the peasants had no heart to rebuild ruins. But with encouragement, the peasants restored the bridge. Now, ox carts can once more pass to market with their vital burdens of rice. And in another village, a dam was constructed. It will control water which formerly flooded villages downstream. Now the water has become a pond for ducks and a reservoir for irrigating vegetable gardens. Along with community projects, individuals are helped, like building a house for the wife of a soldier, a widow perhaps, or a poor farmer. The team doesn't attempt to do all the work, but rather, as they were taught, to inspire the people with the will to help themselves. In some parts of Vietnam, the houses are made of clay. In other parts, they're made of straw. The techniques are different. The results are the same: goodwill and intelligence. The cadres were winning the allegiance of the people. extended to accommodate the larger classes. After 3 years of hard work, 24,000 men had been trained and sent back to their home provinces. As reports showed how successful the teams were, great pressure developed for further expansion of the program. After lengthy discussions between Vietnamese and American officials, the government of Vietnam decided to make the PATH program the basis for their entire pacification effort. The Vietnamese demonstrated their commitment in a decree of January 26, 1966, which stipulated rural construction cadres would be granted draft deferment. The camp at Vung Tau was designated the National Training Center and put under the control of Ministry of Revolutionary Development. Early in 1966, in view of the continuing deterioration of local government, it was decided to expand the program rapidly. The previous class had numbered 1,600. The number in the February class was set at 4,800. The June class to be jumped to 5,600. The September class to be 7,500, which would exhaust the capacity at Vung Tau. Any further expansion would require the building of additional facilities in some other area. From hundreds to thousands, virtually overnight, could thousands still be turned into well-trained, enthusiastic patriots? It had to be done. Time was short. The existence of the nation was at stake. Training schedules were revised. The training period was extended to 13 weeks with every minute accounted for. It was a rigorous program that was to go on 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Much of the burden lay on the guides and the political instructors. The instructors had been chosen for their intelligence, their dedication to anti-communism, their leadership. The guides were also important. They could be compared with combat non-coms, setting an example of responsibility and self-sacrifice. They would stay with their units at all times. In mid-1966, the basic team was changed from a 40 to a 59-man unit. The team leader is responsible for the entire team. He has 2 deputies. There are 3 health workers, 1 intelligence member, and 1 psychological warfare member. 1 deputy is in charge of 3 11-man squads who are responsible for the defense of the team and for gaining the affection of the people. In this task, a musical instrument becomes a weapon. The other deputy is in charge of 3 specialized squads, 1 of which takes a census of the villagers and records their grievances. This is known as the Census Grievance Squad. Another is trained in basic administrative functions, this called the Civic Affairs Squad. The 3rd squad teaches people to help themselves. This is called a New Life Development Squad. All members of the team come from the same region and will be reassigned there. They come mostly from the villages like Trois. Trois and the other members of his team were selected by his province chief on the basis of negotiations with the Ministry of Revolutionary Development. In 3s and 4s all over Vietnam, they prepare to leave their villages for the first time. With the assistance of U.S. and Vietnamese military transports, they were taken to airports in a giant airlift operation, and from here to Vung Tau, where they disembarked by the thousands. They were welcomed by graduate student receptionists and transported by truck to camp. First, the students meet their guide and are enrolled. Thereafter comes the medical examination and shots. Trois would eat food prepared in great kitchens in the camp. Food had to be plentiful and good, for mealtime was a part of the morale-building program. Perhaps the most important event of the first day is the issuing of equipment. For at this time, Trois and the others received the distinctive uniform of the center, the black peasant suit. This suit is to be used almost immediately to establish the keynote of the entire training program in a ceremony called accepting the peasant suit. It is the first step in reaching the mind with the concept of idealism and citizenship.
Thưa các bạn, hôm nay
What is the significance of the black peasant suit? It is a symbol of humility, misery, and oppression. The peasant of Vietnam, too poor to buy soap, must wear a garb that will not show the dirt and need be washed but once a week. Thus, the donning of the black suit carries with it a vow to accept and to try to better the lot of the peasant. Suddenly, Trois is being offered a new and exciting role, a crusader for a better way of life. Fishermen, farmers, blacksmiths. For the first time, they identify themselves as something outside their families and villages. They feel the excitement, and by putting on the suit, they accept the challenge. They are bound to a common cause as citizens of Vietnam. Changing a way of life in short time calls for unusual methods. Within 3 days, all students are organized into cells. These are the basic units of study. A system that seems to make them work harder and learn faster. Lessons are first presented in writing and are studied in the barracks by the students. The second step is the lecture.
Hôm nay chúng ta bước qua cái giai đoạn thứ 3 trong 7 bước học tập của chúng ta để tìm hiểu xem rằng là chúng ta cùng một nguồn gốc cả mà tại làm sao mặt trận giải phóng miền Nam cứ đòi chém giết chúng ta. Thưa các bạn, trở về nguồn để mà tìm kiếm cái cội rễ, cái căn nguyên của cái con người chúng ta, con người Việt Nam.
The cells engage in free discussion after the lecture. This way the meaning becomes crystal clear.
Việt Cộng là bọn cộng sản, Việt chúng theo thuyết Mác Lê coi trọng về vật chất.
To further clarify the meaning, there is the question and answer period.
Làm cách mạng chúng ta phải làm thế nào để cho đúng với nghĩa của hai chữ cách mạng?
Thì các bạn đã thấy hồi xưa đó có nhiều người ai cũng tự nhận mình là làm cách mạng.
Then a student presents the lecture.
Mục đích của bài điểm thứ nhất, chúng ta dùng lịch sử.
Following the student's presentation comes class discussion. By this time, any doubts have been revealed, and the instructor and guide have been able to quickly resolve them. Finally, the instructor reviews the lesson just before the examination, which often takes place on the barracks floor. The students know that the results will be entered on their records both at the school and back home in the province. The goal of all instruction is how to return to the village. This means training in weapons to protect the team and the villagers. Trois knows he is not a soldier, but he also knows he must gain time to make contact with the people and link them with local authorities. Meanwhile, his survival may depend upon his aim. Students are all taught elementary military tactics, like setting up a perimeter defense. This will serve against small Viet Cong units. Against bigger forces, the teams are instructed to fade away into the countryside until the Viet Cong have gone beyond the village. Another way to protect a village is the ambush. Charges are placed in the area of expected attack. They are carefully hidden. Cardboard figures simulate the Viet Cong. The charge is detonated. When the enemy has been stunned, the team attacks. Medical training is also a factor in village defense. Students with aptitude are given special training. In combat medicine, wounds are made to look as realistic as possible, and the latest splints are introduced to the medics-to-be. But perhaps even more important to the team's future in the village is what is known as the General Medical Kit. Each team is provided with 3 of them, containing the latest drugs. Village medicine is important. A child restored to health is good public relations. Other classes learn how the body works, the circulatory system, for example. Their interest can be seen in the quality of work they do. In addition to paramilitary and medical training, the students are also given training in practical politics. For example, how to stage an anti-communist rally. Banners are made with anti-communist slogans, and student speakers lecture on the nature of communism and how to fight it. Students listen carefully, for they may be asked to make speeches themselves. In real life, the Viet Cong often try to break up such rallies. The Viet Cong attack is staged, so the students will know how to react. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone learns. Guards, medics, and even the mock Viet Cong.
Cái bước thứ 6 là cái bước nhân dân tự vệ. Làm
The
thế nào?
last step in reestablishing local government is the people's own self-reliance. This is the future.
Họ biết sử dụng cái vũ khí, sử dụng để mà bảo vệ cho gia đình họ, để bảo vệ cho xóm làng của họ.
Talent among the students is encouraged. Here they are making posters to attract voters in an election campaign. Again, everyone plays a role. The voters, the registrar, the precinct workers. The students take turns playing the role of the guards, which are necessary to prevent Viet Cong interventions. Meanwhile, the team learns how to win the people by good works. This is called new life development. In the village, the team learns how to reach the youngsters. The surest way to the hearts of the adults is through their children. Throughout the training period, the students are given field problems such as building a road to make it easier to get produce to market. And when the people are willing to work to help themselves, their tasks can be made easier through the use of materials of all kinds to be supplied by the free world: tools, seeds, medicines. This is the way that most members of the team spend their time in the villages. As the team wins the people by good deeds, the Mobile Census Grievance Squad begins to play an important role. A small house near the center of the village is leased by the squad. In a country without a census, it is basically an effort to find out who is who. One of the important surface aspects of the interview is to determine the grievances and the needs of the people. This is a way of getting material aid to the people who really need it. The information acquired by the Census Grievance Squad is a dramatic example of how the whole process results in the collection of positive, accurate intelligence. All the information is carefully assembled and maps are made, including certain houses colored in red. These are the houses of suspected Viet Cong sympathizers. The students are nearing the end of their training.
Là bởi vì đời mới đã được phát triển rồi, chúng ta sẽ tổ chức quần chúng lại. Chúng ta
But what have they learned?
lại để mà họ có thể bảo
To defend themselves and the village. importance of good behavior, how to help the villagers to a better life, how to link people to local authority, how to develop self-reliance among the people, how to collect information. Are they willing to face the long hours, the disappointments? As thousands have already done, they accept the challenge. Be loyal to our country, to perform our duties unselfishly, serve the people, especially the aged, the sick, and the poor, to be united to fight against the communist traitors and other enemies of the nation. With their training completed, the citizen soldiers begin their work in the village, often in the simplest ways, creating confidence among the people, based on the philosophy diametrically opposed to that of the communists. Instead of governing through fear, they create trust and affection. Instead of destroying, they build. For they know that here, locally, in each village, they are building a whole nation. And good deeds will provide the sinews, the confidence upon which a people can knit local government to regional government to national government, which will bandage a nation's wounds and show a proud, strong, independent, and friendly face to the world.